guys, welcome back. Sorry I took a break last week, but I had a nice festive-y outdoorsy weekend and I didn't actually get around to making any content, so I'm really sorry about that. Hope you didn't miss me too much. I missed you guys a little bit. So what are we talking about this week then? Well, I was reading an article in the Independent about plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery and celebrities, and it made me think about the default face. Now, what is the default face, I hear you cry? Well, it's a face that we are consistently starting to see in the media, out and about, and it's very much pushed by, I think, social media. So the big question I'm going to ask is, are we heading toward a world where human faces become homogenized by AI, aesthetics culture, and cosmetic optimization? And what does that mean for our identity? So basically, are we all going to end up looking the same? Are we all going to end up looking like a blended, cloned version of ourselves? So that's what today's video is about. This is what the deep dive is today. So let's get to it. So there was an article in the Independent and it had a picture of Jennifer Lawrence in it. Beautiful woman. Early 30s, maybe mid 30s, I'm not entirely sure, had a baby recently and has been in Hollywood filming content or an actress for quite a number of years. And she recently had a bit of a glow up and everyone was talking about how she looked, her face. And this was also followed by Emma Stone, who too has recently had a bit of a facial glow up, and everybody was talking about her face and her looks and her appearance. And then there's also Mandy Moore, another American celebrity who has had some surgery or sort of suggested surgery, and people are commenting on her face. And it got me thinking, like, why are all these women in their mid-30s who I think are quite young still? I mean, please feel free to argue with me. And the Independent piece was sort of talking about this growing trend, particular on female celebrities, to adopt a very specific look. Lifted brows, so like your eyebrows are up here, your skin's really smooth, you have high cheekbones, no under eye bags, your jawline's tight, and in short you have this sort of surgically snatched aesthetic. And I think, what's her name, Freaky Friday actress Lindsay Lohan, she sort of emerged, didn't she, a couple of years ago or 2 years ago with, again, this sort of really snatched, tight face looking amazing. And everybody has been sort of talking about it. And I know that Kris Jenner also has had, praise for her face as well. So it just highlights how, these beautiful celebrities are, first and foremost, being scrutinized and judged very much for what they do or don't do to their physical appearance. But it's also, again, sort of perpetuating that there is a need for fillers, Botox and culture. And we're being tarred with that brush again, aren't we? Like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. We're told we can't age, we need to stay youthful, we need to stay vibrant, we need to stay relevant, and then at the same time we should be growing old gracefully, acting our age, not filling our bodies with chemicals. And it's a really hard line to kind of walk along and to be very balanced with. In the article, the author also laments this shift towards what they call cosmetic homogenization. So what do we mean by this? It's that we are starting to lose our distinctive uniqueness in how we choose to look, and that we're starting to look a little bit the same, like this becoming this generic facial type that is starting to be seen on TikTok, on Instagram, in the media. And again, it's kind of diluting those natural, organic, beautiful faces in their distinctive, unique way that we're probably perhaps used to. And I suppose that it's becoming a digitally perfect face because it's kind of AI augmented, and I suppose this is kind of the result of filters, isn't it? Like, we've had filters for the last sort of 10-15 years, and there's a whole generation, if you look at Gen Z, that have grown up with filter content. And personally, I don't actually use filters very often. In fact, I don't use filters at all, because I kind of feel like you should see what I look like in real life. And when people do see me in real life, they're not going to be surprised because, hey, that's how I look, because this is literally how I look. I think that is really not very well phrased, but you get what I mean. Like, I look natural. I look like I do Obviously, I'm using lighting today to try and make, my pop a little bit against my nice background here. But generally, I look like this, same hair, same face, might put a bit of lippy on, but, this is how I look. But we are starting to get people who are really kind of concerned with how they look, and that their digital face, their online face, their filtered face doesn't kind of reflect their real world face. And I remember a few years ago, it was Khloe Kardashian whose grandmother had taken a picture of her by a swimming pool looking amazing, and she'd posted it to social media, and Khloe had insisted that it got pulled down, and she looked great in the photo, but it was like unfiltered and not edited, and it wasn't exactly how she wanted to appear, or the image she wanted to present. And I remember thinking at the time, that's a bit sad, isn't it? It's almost like her real authentic self isn't desirable, and I know she's probably had a lot of surgery and augmentation to look as amazing as she does, but you shouldn't have to hide behind an inauthentic version of yourself. So the article doesn't necessarily claim that both Emma Stone and Jennifer Lawrence have had surgery, but it does underscore rumours and speculation that they've had some work done, and that actually this poses another question, that women's looks are out there for scrutiny and judgment, regardless of whether they might have gained a bit of weight and their face might look different. They might have lost a bit of weight and their face might look different. They might just be aged. The lighting might be different. Sometimes we can look different at different angles. So again, if you're being scrutinized so much, maybe it is going to have a psychological effect, and you are going to be feeling not as confident, not as great about how you look. So yeah, this is kind of maybe where we're getting to this homogenized face. There's a lot of things that's kind of intersect here and make it a big issue. So what does this all have to do with the default face? Well, it's concerning, isn't it? The phenomenon isn't just sort of in Hollywood. We're actually starting to see reflect and a shift in cultural beauty standards, and this is accelerated by social media, digital editing. We've heard the term the Instagram face, smooth skin, high cheekbones, full lips, and it's kind of becoming a default ideal. How many people do you know that have had their lips filled? How many people do you know are getting a bit of Botox or a bit of filler? This is actually on quite an everyday level now. Things like this are happening. This isn't just celebrity culture. This is like culture that's prevalent in the world that I certainly live in. And younger people, more concerningly, are having this done. Those in their 20s, and there was an article a few months back actually that was criticising the cast of Love Island for looking really old, considering they were in their 20s. Some of them looked a good 10 or 15 years older. And the kind of thought behind it was that they'd had procedures far too young, and that their faces didn't need to have this sort of love. And reportedly, younger people are increasingly getting enhancements done. And the idea is that it's preventability. Is it preventability though, or is it actually kind of harming us? Rather than waiting for the signs of early aging to appear, so having Botox as a preventative measure rather than starting to have it when you feel you need it. And again, capitalism is under this again, isn't it? Somebody's going to make money out of making you feel that you need to have Botox because you're getting older. You're supposed to get older. You're supposed to age. This is really normal and healthy and what we've been doing for a long time. You can't look the same way. If we all look the same way, we'd all look like we did when we were babies, and none of us do. Our faces grow, our faces change. And this is part of the beauty and the joy of the human experience. But also there is a psychological and societal ripple effect, okay? So the article suggests that a culture obsessed with perfection can erode appreciation for uniqueness. Now, this is it. Like, there are some people out there that insist on keeping their kind of natural look and, keeping the gap in their teeth, or not doing the eyebrows, or keeping their natural hair color, or letting the gray come in. And that's beautiful. That is absolutely amazing. And I certainly, I think people look that great after surgery. I think if you've had to adjust your face, I don't mind seeing people looking a bit older. That's okay. I want to see that. I want to see reflections of people that look like me and having similar experiences to me. I actually am going to be miserable when I see somebody who was a hot celebrity when I was a teenager who actually isn't looking any different because they've had so much surgery. You know what? It's your choice, and I'm not anti-surgery, and I don't know what I'll end up doing to myself in the future. But I do think it's sad that we are getting this kind of default face. And I don't think it's great. I mean, what do you guys think about this? So, are we moving to some form of visual conformity? Is this becoming a dystopian society where we all walk around looking exactly the same and our loss of identity starts because we all have exactly the same face? Are we sort of going to go in and start asking for a Lohan because we're all going to look the same? I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit eccentric here, but it's almost like we're sculpting everybody to look a certain way, and I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with that. I mean, maybe you are. What do you think? And it runs counter to celebrating individuality. I think uniqueness is certainly an underrated quality. What makes somebody special is that there is only one of them. You know, there's only one of you. There isn't another version of you or the best version of you. Even if you're identical twins, there will be significant differences in personality or tastes or culture that make you the distinctive individual that you are. And that's nice. That adds to the complexity of being human, and different things appeal to different people. We don't all have the same tastes, actually. We don't all like the same things. We don't all pursue the same hobbies and interests. So why are we all pursuing to have the same look, the same face? You know, I mean, it's great if that's how you want to look, but should we all be trying to look that way? And it also raises some tricky questions, doesn't it? You know, is cosmetic alteration necessarily a form of self-expression? Or is it surrendering to external pressures to look away or to conform to a societal standard? And when individuals choose procedures, is it fair to judge their motivations or to even speculate against them? If somebody wants to look better and feel better about themselves, then I'm not there to judge them. But when we're all being sort of conditioned to think we need to look a certain way, that's probably where I'm sort of going to step in and go, hang on a minute, we don't need to look like this. And I suppose, how does this trend affect wider public perceptions, especially young people? If more young people in the last few years are having Botox and fillers, then are we starting to lose this idea of normality and how people ought to look? You know, this is a little bit concerning. And interestingly, you might think that I'm just thinking about the women here, but this affects men too. And increasingly, it's beginning to impact on men. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail now. So, men are suffering the same, but it actually plays out slightly differently. And rather than making them want to appear younger and softer and obviously more feminine, we want them to appear more masculine, more optimized, a strong jaw, pronounced chin, a high straight nose, thicker brows, fuller hair, and a lean gym body. So men are under scrutiny, it would seem, the way that women have. And this is kind of interesting that it's kind of catching up to both genders now and not just one. So women are pushed towards this snatched, ultra smooth aesthetic, which is youthful, and men are increasingly pushed towards a hypermasculine, optimized look. So what procedures are men actually getting? So jawline contouring, chin filler, Botox around the eyes and forehead, often framed as looking less tired, so having a little bit of a freshen up there. Rhinoplasty, so getting your nose done, that's again that high straight nose. Hair transplants, I mean, how many footballers do you know have had hair transplants? I mean, it seems to be quite common. And having the buccal fat removed to hollow out the cheeks. Yes, men are doing that too. It's not just the ladies. So basically, there is an emotional core to this. And what's striking is women are expected to look younger, softer, and smoother, as I said, and men are expected to look sharper, stronger, more dominant. So it is different direction. However, it's the same mechanism, isn't it? It's the same anxiety. It's the same preoccupation with our physicality. And it's going to mess us up, isn't it? If we're so busy judging ourselves and other people and how they look, it's certainly going to have ramifications and problems. And what are these going to be exactly? Okay, so where is this all going to lead to? Well, there are a couple of things that could end up coming from this. So first of all, the default face that is powered by artificial intelligence or AI. So we're drifting toward a world where the beauty standard isn't even based on real human beings. Let that sink in. Your face isn't based on what a human's face should look like. It's based on something else. That's a really unusual way of thinking about it, but it is true. Artificial intelligence is telling you what is the best face that you should have. Surely your natural face is the best face you ought to have. And I suppose that, it isn't based on real human beings, it's based on machine generated composites of what they perceive or an algorithm thinks is optimal attractiveness. And as these synthetic faces become more normalized and we become more exposed to them and more used to seeing them and the filters that maybe they are generating, real human variation is going to become more flawed. We're not going to accept those little flaws and little quirks that actually make people unique and distinctive. And therefore, cosmetic procedures will increase because we're trying to replicate a digital style that doesn't really exist. And the standard will keep drifting because the algorithm will keep updating. So every time we modify ourselves to suit, the algorithm would change with a more, update that's going to move us further away from our natural faces. So it's like chasing a mirage that moves every time you get closer to it. We are going to end up with a face that, quite frankly, doesn't even look human. And that is pretty scary, if you ask me. So there'll be rising pressure. We already feel this pressure to look a certain way, to be our best selves. But actually, I've already commented that earlier intervention is already starting to happen. And if you look at Gen Alpha and their skincare, 11-year-olds don't need product. They don't need toners, astringents, maybe a bit of moisturizer and a bit of SPF, but actually they don't need that. They are not needing that. And yet, we are seeing increasingly these young people put chemicals and things on their face, have skincare routines, but it's almost like it's a precocious act of trying to be grown up rather than a necessary act that they need to do. And then if we get Botox and fillers starting younger and more preventative procedures, then we're going to actually tweak those expectations of what's normal to look a certain way in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s. It's going to sort of, again, remove itself from that natural human face. And men are joining in the shared landscape now, and we're all going to start seeing more, of that very hypermasculine face. And then what's going to happen is that young people, the teenagers, are going to look at the generation above them and they're going to feel uncomfortable. Puberty is a tough time as it is. And if you already feel insecure about your natural look, seeing people that are artificially tweaked and improved or an algorithm version of what's good, you are starting to really going to separate yourself from, a realistic vision of what you ought to look like. So for many people, maintenance will begin before anything, really changes. But like the levels of that maintenance is going to increase maybe the older that people get. So yeah, definitely rising pressure for early intervention. And then will we end up with a two-tier face economy? What do I mean by a two-tier face economy? Will we end up with a divide, the aesthetically haves and the aesthetically have-nots? So tier one, people who have the money and the time to maintain the aesthetic that they've invested in. So regular tweaks, hair appointments, lasers, injectables, looking polished, youthful and symmetrical within an inch of their life because they have the money and the capabilities to do so. And then will we have everybody else? They actually look more and more different. And it becomes really apparent and also maybe can allude to status and wealth because you can't afford to look a certain way and that they are looking normal by historical standards, but actually they're not suiting what the modern, two-tier system would mean. And I suppose this again mirrors inequality in other areas. Optimization will happen to those who can afford it. And it's no surprise that so many people in Hollywood are adopting this phase because they can afford to look that way. But, the regular people, they've got other things to spend their money on rather than having a tightened face and their eyebrows lifted. And I suppose if we end up with a two-tier face economy, we're going to end up with backlash, aren't we? Eventually, the coin will drop that this isn't how we want to look. So there probably will be a resistance movement, as there always is, to these sort of extremes. Maybe we'll go back to wanting faces with personality and character. We want to see visible aging. We want to see unique, distinct faces. We want to see the charm of imperfection. And identities are not curated into oblivion. Things that make you, that's your biggest currency, isn't it? The most unique things about you are your special little skill set. They are interesting and appealing. And that's amazing, isn't it? And just like minimalism emerged from consumer overload, maybe authenticity may become a cultural flex. And it's like, well, these are my natural eyebrows, and this is my natural hair color, and this is my natural skin. And we will be less inclined to try and replicate that false version of the ideal face. And maybe real skin might become the new rebellion, which would be great, wouldn't it? Because we all live in the same, our own skin. And, if we could just let it be as it is, that would be great, wouldn't it? So there will also be psychological fallout. And psychological fallout is probably the most concerning aspect of all issue. Isn't surgery. There's nothing wrong with getting surgery, but it's actually our sense of identity and being comfortable with who we are and our emotions as well. There are people, and we can tell they're like not maybe great, and body dysmorphia is a real thing, where they manipulate how they look because they can't accept or feel comfortable with how they look, and therefore go to absolute extremes, and that people will feel detached from their own faces and difficulty recognizing each other and themselves. And this dysmorphia isn't great, is it? That is a psychological problem. And I suppose that it's that value we have in ourselves, like, am I enough? Will I be better if I do this? But that's how society seems to be making us feel. I'll be better when I've got a better paid job. I'll be better when I buy these new clothes. I'll be better when I wear this makeup. I'll be better with this perfume. I'll be better with this holiday. Actually, you can't run away from yourself. You are who you are, and you have to do the inner work and acknowledge things that are uncomfortable or are issues, and try and seek help for them, because to try and kind of, self-soothe yourself by products or surgery or consumerism isn't going to help you feel any better on the inside. And it's only when you feel better on the inside that actually I think you can feel better on the outside, if that makes sense. And I suppose that we need to think about that. What's going to happen in the next decade? What are the next generation of faces going to end up looking like? We need to think about this psychological fallout, really. And I suppose eventually there may even be a reckoning. There'll be tech, money, insecurity, and trend cycles. Trends. What is this thing with trends? And sometimes I see a thing that's a trend and I'm like, I don't even think that's that cool. But everybody sort of wants to jump on bandwagons. As I said, human beings are a sociable group of people. We don't want to always be different or not the same as everybody else. So sometimes we just go along with things. We're sheeple. And we'll hit a point where we get unsustainable, won't we? Where these faces will just become so extreme. There'll be too much mental health fallout. And maybe eventually there'll be a bit more regulation and we can sort of return back to having, natural faces. I mean, has anyone ever watched the film Gattaca? I watched it in the 90s, and it really was about like these perfect societies and gene manipulation of babies and not having natural babies born anymore. I mean, are we going to end up like that? These procedures start in the uterus, where we're having little implements and procedures to make sure that we end up with perfect children that have the perfect face. I mean, that's just creepy. And hopefully that is not where we're going to end up, because that will be the absolute dystopia. So, are we heading towards a default face? I don't know, but we could end up there, couldn't we? And I can see us ending up there very easily, especially as we go through filters, AI, surgery, and social pressures to look a certain way. And faces are evolving. I mean, they're going to evolve anyway, but, are we artificially evolving them? And we're witnessing a deeper question unfold. What does it mean to look like ourselves in a world that keeps nudging us toward a single shared template? Social media is homogenizing us. It's homogenizing our tastes. It's watering down our intellect. It's polarizing our viewpoints. There's a lot of problems that come from this amazing technology, but actually we need to hold ourselves accountable, and we need to look after ourselves as well, and all the people that we're, raising and surrounded by as well. We want to resist maybe falling into this potentially dangerous default face. And actually, we want to be comfortable with who we are and embrace who we are and feel safe being the people that we are. And you don't need to follow what an algorithm is telling you to do. You don't need to follow social media. In fact, let's put the phone down. Let's go and look at each other's faces in real, natural daylight and be happy and joyous that we have eyes to see and mouths to taste and noses to smell, and that we don't have to look a particular certain way. And perhaps the most powerful choice that we have is to simply stay conscious of the forces shaping us and decide deliberately which ones we want to follow. Okay. So that's my take on the default face. What do you think? Do you think I'm being a little over pedantic here? Do you think, there's nothing wrong with maybe everybody having these tweaks? Is it okay to change our appearance? I've got lipstick on. This isn't necessarily my natural hair color. I'm doing the sort of lo-fi version of this, but, just because it's getting a bit more hi-fi, does it mean that we should be judging it or ridiculing it? And it is interesting that we all seem to be affected by this. So let me know your thoughts. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ta-ta for now. Bye.